All right, let's get into it. Today we're going to shrink down, way down, to the microscopic level. Why? Because there is an epic war happening inside your mouth every single day. We're talking about the secret battle that ends with a cavity.
Think about this for a second. There are more bacteria living in your mouth right now than there are people on the entire planet. That is just wild. But they're not just chilling in there. They're building, they're fighting, and sometimes, they're destroying. So the big question is, how does this gigantic community of microbes go from just living peacefully to literally drilling a hole in your tooth?
To really get that, we need to completely change how we think about our mouths. It's not just for eating and talking. You have to see it for what it truly is, a complex, bustling, and totally alive ecosystem.
And that ecosystem has a name, the oral microbiome. It's the whole shebang, all the bacteria, fungi, viruses, all their DNA in the place they call home, your teeth, your tongue, your gums. And here's the cool part. Just like your fingerprint, the microbiome in your mouth is 100% unique to you.
Now, inside this world, you've got two kinds of characters. First, you have your resident flora. Think of them as the locals, the good neighbors. They've set up shop for the long haul, and they actually protect their turf by keeping troublemakers out. Then you've got the transient flora. These guys are just tourists, passing through from your food or the air. They don't usually stick around long enough to cause any real problems.
So, the main stage for all this action, this microbial drama, is something we all know, dental plaque. But I'm willing to bet that what you think plaque is probably not the full story. You know that fuzzy feeling on your teeth if you haven't brushed in a while? That is not just leftover bits of your lunch. It's a biofilm. And a biofilm isn't just a pile of germs, it's a sophisticated, highly organized city built by bacteria for bacteria. A sticky, stubborn community that latches right onto your teeth. And this bacterial metropolis doesn't just pop up overnight. Oh no. It's a carefully planned construction project with 4 distinct phases. So let's walk through it. How a perfectly clean tooth becomes the foundation for this thriving city of microbes.
It all kicks off with the pioneers. The very first bacteria land on that clean tooth surface and set up a base camp. And some of these early birds, like a species called Neisseria, do something absolutely critical. They start using up all the oxygen in the area. This is a game changer, because it basically rolls out the welcome mat for a whole other class of bacteria, the anaerobes, the kind that hate oxygen, to come move into the neighborhood.
So, once the no oxygen sign is up, step 2 begins. Now you get waves of new bacterial immigrants arriving. Different types start showing up, building on top of the pioneers layer by layer. It's like new suburbs are being added, making the community more diverse and a lot more complex. Okay, and now we get to the most important part. Step 3. This is where the main villain of our story makes its entrance. Mutans streptococci. This bacterium, especially when it gets a taste of sugar, starts pumping out this incredibly sticky, glue-like gunk. This stuff is literally the mortar and cement for their bacterial city. It helps them stick to the tooth, and even more importantly, it helps them all stick to each other, making the whole structure super strong. And what you get in the end is a mature biofilm. But it's not just a city anymore, it's a fortress. That sticky matrix they built acts like a shield, protecting all the bacteria inside. This makes them way more resistant to things like mouthwash or even your body's own immune defenses compared to any bacteria that are just floating around on their own. So we have this well-defended bacterial city living in a kind of delicate balance. But then we introduce the one thing that can send this entire ecosystem into complete chaos: sugar. And this is what a cavity, or dental caries, really is. It's not just a simple infection, it's a disease of dysbiosis. That's a fancy word for an ecological collapse. When you eat sugar, certain bacteria in that biofilm just go wild. They start fermenting those carbs like there's no tomorrow, and the waste they produce, well, it's an absolute disaster for your teeth.
So let's take a closer look at our number 1 suspect, Streptococcus mutans. This guy has 3 devastating superpowers. First, it's acidogenic, meaning it eats sugar and spits out corrosive acid. Second, it's aciduric. This is incredible. It means it can actually survive and thrive in its own toxic acidic waste, an environment that kills off most of its competition. And third, like we just saw, it's the master architect, producing that sticky glue that builds its fortress.
But wait, it's not totally a one-sided fight. There's actually a fascinating civil war going on inside the plaque. On one side, you have the acid-producing villains, like S. mutans.
But on the other side, you actually have helpers, like Veillonella. These are considered benevolent bacteria because, get this, they eat the dangerous acid the villains make. They convert it into weaker stuff, which helps neutralize the whole environment. A cavity only happens when the villains win, when they outnumber the helpers and produce more acid than the good guys can clean up.
So what happens when those acid producers do win the war? The result is the slow, methodical destruction of your tooth. Let's look at how that damage actually unfolds, step by painful step.
A cavity doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It follows a pretty clear timeline, starting as a small, reversible problem and getting progressively worse and more painful if you don't intervene.
Stage 1 is what dentists call a white spot lesion. It's the very first sign that minerals are being pulled out of your tooth enamel by all that acid. It just looks like a little chalky white spot. But here's the most important thing to know. At this stage, the battle is not lost. The damage can still be reversed. Your body can actually repair the tooth if you change the conditions in your mouth.
Stage 2, though, is the point of no return. This is cavitation. The acid has finally won that battle. The surface of the enamel literally breaks and a physical hole, a cavity, is formed. The damage is now permanent. There's no going back. And from there, it just gets worse. The decay burrows deeper into the softer layer of the tooth. Then it can hit the pulp where the nerve is, and that's when you get that classic, awful toothache. If it's still not treated, the infection can spread right out the bottom of the root and form a dangerous abscess in your jaw.
Okay, that all sounds pretty terrifying, I know. But here's the good news. You are the manager of your own oral ecosystem. You hold the power to stop this entire destructive process before it even starts.
So how do you do it? Well, it all comes back to managing the environment. Diet is huge. Limit how often you eat sugar, and you're basically starving the villains. Fluoride gives your teeth a protective shield against acid. Brushing and flossing, that's you physically going in there and demolishing those bacterial cities before they become impenetrable fortresses. Things like sealants and sugar substitutes are just more tools in your arsenal to keep the peace. So when you really think about it, that complex, unique world inside your mouth is your responsibility. What all this shows us is that preventing a cavity isn't just about cleaning your teeth. It's about being a good caretaker for an entire microbial ecosystem. So the real question is, how are you going to protect yours?